Welcome to my sewing room. We have so many exciting techniques to share with you today, and some of the most beautiful clothes I've ever seen that my very dear friend Marlis Bennett from Bernina of America has brought to share. This pillow is absolutely out of this world with the beautiful tones of beiges, browns, and ecru's. And this is what is so interesting about this pillow. I just love it. You can button it off and change it. So you've got a basic pillow that you could use seasons or just change it anywhere your whim would take you to change it. This is a magnificent woman's blouse using lots of different fabrics, which is one of the real trends in heirloom sewing now. Marlis has used a striped silk dupioni, a linen. She's used silk dupioni with pearls. And on the machine, on silk organza, she has done these wonderful little rosebuds on kind of a peekaboo sleeve. And at the bottom, more of the striped silk dupioni piped with a green silk dupioni. Stitching off the edge is one of Marlis's favorite things to do. This elegant green linen blouse has stitching off the edge around the neckline, around the collar, and has a magnificent tone-on-tone green on green embroidery in the front. Very tailored linen blouse, very beautiful and very simple. This is one of my favorite things. This is a silk baby kimono. This is truly stitching off the edge at its absolute most precious. In the variegated thread with all kinds of stitching off the edge and stitching on the edge. And then look at this absolutely sweet little embroidery that says baby at the bottom. Kimonos are absolutely precious for babies. And since we have a new baby, I can tell you the little arms get cold. And this is a wonderful thing to put on for the little arms. This beautiful suit was done by my friend Gail Hillard. It is very tailored. It has off the edge stitching on this beautiful white piqué collar, and the ribbon has been stitched down, and then a little tie and good looking little knickers, a beautiful way for a little boy to look. Using the New Zealand blouse pattern, Marlis has done a really elegant cutwork design on the linen, and then she has trimmed it with a wonderful handmade tatting. Once again, elegant for women. And this nightshirt, what could be sweeter than a nightshirt, and more comfortable too. Once again, Marlis has done machine embroidery around the collar, and she has done off the edge stitching down the front of this really neat nightshirt. And now, won't you come along over to the technique boards with me, and I'm going to share with you just how easy it is to do off the edge stitching. This section is going to be entitled Off the Edge Stitching, and it is fascinating. Let me share with you how it's done. First of all, you can do it on several different mediums. You can use this fabric, linen fabric. You can do this stitching on entredot, on twill tape, but this is very important, this shiny stuff. This is water-soluble stabilizer. Now then, we're going to fold it under and get a finished edge, and then the water-soluble stabilizer is underneath that edge. All right, if you're going to do it on entredot, you need to trim away the edge of the entredot and then put the entredot once again on this water-soluble stabilizer. If you're going to stitch on twill tape, you once again need to be sure the twill tape is right on the water-soluble stabilizer. Now this is a precious stitch that is off the edge stitching, and Marlis calls this her picket fence stitch. It's really elegant. It looks like something you would get on one of the French designer blouses. Now then, this is the same off the edge stitch right here, the picket fence stitch done on entredot, and this is another really sweet little off the edge stitch done on the entredot, once again on the water soluble. Now after the water soluble has been washed out, look at this delicate and very pretty edging, and here it is done in a pale seafoam green on the entredot. I think it's truly elegant. And now I have a very special guest who is going to share with you the tricks on how you can do this stitching. I'm happy to have with me again this year Marlis Bennett, who is training consultant for Bernina of America. Marlis, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Off the edge stitching is really a lot of fun, and it's a neat technique. If you try some of the stitches on your machine, you need a very good water-soluble stabilizer, so get the best one you can. And then there are specialty feet for this technique because the water-soluble stabilizer is kind of a little bit sticky, and then you need a foot that will glide over it. There's a zipper foot, there's a 5mm non-stick foot, there's also a straight stitch foot that will allow you to sew straight lines. If, however, you need to follow a line, you can still use an edge stitch foot and then reduce your presser foot pressure, and you will be able to do the off-the-edge stitching. As Martha said, you need to have a finished edge, and I chose to do this on entredo because I think it's a really nice airy look, and it gives you the chance to put this in places that you normally wouldn't be able to do. What's really important when you're doing this technique is that you try the stitches out on practice fabric, because otherwise what looks really good when it's stitched out can look a little bit ratty when it gets to the stitching. Here's a finished look of our little picket fence stitch, and it is the stitch that I'm going to be using today. If you do a scallop and you cord the scallop, you would run a cord in your zigzag stitch, and this really does look like handmade tatting, doesn't
Marlis,
it?
I think it really does look like tatting on the sewing machine. I just love it.
Now, when you do this, this is how it's going to look when it is stitched on your stabilizer. I want to stitch this for you. It's not really hard. It's just a little stitch that has a bunch of little V's in it. You need to practice with the different stitches on your machine and find one that you like. The testing is very important because, as you saw earlier, some of them do tend to look a little bit ratty.
When you wash the stabilizer
When you wash
away,
that
okay.
stabilizer away. When you're using an entredo, you want to make sure that the beading of the entredo is on the farthest left side of your stitch so that the needle just neatly goes into each hole. It's a very easy little stitch to do, and you just run it along. You don't want to sew full speed with this. You want to take your time, and I have reduced the presser foot pressure somewhat on this stitch. When you're finished with it, you want to take that piece of fabric with the stabilizer, cut away as much stabilizer as you can, and then go soak it for about 30 minutes in tepid water. You don't want it very hot because you don't know what it'll do to the fabric, but you want it just warm enough. You want to let it sit there and soak. If this was done with a heavier thread and with a decor thread in the bobbin, which is a heavy thread, and then the regular 30 weight thread on top. This one, however,
heavy thread in the bobbin then, and regular thread on the top.
and I used a secondary bobbin case for that, so that I don't have to mess with my normal bobbin case. And this one is the same stitch but done much lighter with a 30 weight in both bobbin and top thread.
Well, Marlis, that is fascinating. So you can just play with all the stitches you have on your machine and see if you can find something that will be just beautiful.
Take some time and familiarize yourself which ones work and which ones don't.
Marlis, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And next, we have some lovely lingerie for you. Marlis calls this nightshirt her Tucked and Roses nightshirt. It's made out of silk charmeuse, and this is really fascinating. This is that wonderful picket fence off the wall stitching that you just shared with us, Marlis. The tucks are 1/4-inch tucks, and these sleeves are absolutely fabulous. These are on the silk charmeuse, and Marlis has done little rosebuds on the sleeves, and at the bottom of the cuff is some more of this off the side stitching that she has done. Marlis, this is so adorable. I think you have another technique for us.
I certainly do. I certainly do. Working with this nightshirt, because we're working on a different fabric than we normally do, if you have these stitching aids available to you, they would be great to use. This is a narrower stitch plate. It's a 5.5mm stitch plate, and this is a straight stitch plate for your straight stitching. Also, it's helpful to have a 1/4-inch foot because the tucks on the nightshirt are 1/4-inch tucks that go down the front. You also want to use a small hoop to do the embroidery because your embroidery hoop is supposed to be fitted to the size of your embroidery design. And you want to hoop your water-soluble stabilizer in that embroidery hoop. To do your embroidery, now I have chosen a wonderful little design from your design card.
All right.
It's one of the little rose designs on that design card. And we're going to get ready to do our embroidery. We're going to hoop the water-soluble stabilizer, and then I like to use a temporary spray adhesive, and I'm going to move this away, and just spray inside my hoop. You can see that it's gotten a little white in there, but believe me, within 24 to 48 hours, that is gone. And then you want to lay your shirt sleeve in there and press it down firmly. Now what I usually do on that entire shirt sleeve is I make little marks with a water-soluble marker on there first to decide in which direction I want those little rosebuds to go, because there's not a rhyme or reason, and you can't do this incorrectly.
Oh, I love that.
You can just do them anywhere you want. Once your design is stitched, because you're working with a very sheer fabric, you want to pull it back and then trim around your design, trim that water-soluble away so you're not pulling anything. That's why that water-soluble is so important, is that you're not going to have to pull on the design with that sheer fabric.
That wouldn't be good.
That would not be a good thing. Would not be a good thing. Something else I've used on that shirt was a button sew-on foot, because it does allow you to sew those buttons on, and it has a shank in there that moves up and down and allows you to get the right shank for closing in the front so that the buttons don't look like they were plastered on there.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful trick.
Our technique for this segment is a roll and shell edge right here. I've done this in the white because you could do it on the charmeuse also. And you notice it has very little tiny tucks on this, and it's because I've used a shorter stitch length with my zigzag stitch. This is just, it's very easy to do. If you use a foot, it's called a roll and shell hemmer.
Okay.
There are several hemmer feet, but this one does make the very little tiny tucks in there. It has a coil in the front that allows that fabric to coil, and so it folds it over.
Okay.
And so then the zigzag holds that fold in place.
Okay.
And it's really the best hem for this type of fabric.
It really does. It's hard to hem these slippy, slimy fabrics. They're so gorgeous.
Oh, they're gorgeous, but it's so difficult.
So the rolled hem foot is
the rolled hem foot. And I've got this one on a fairly wide stitch length. It's a zigzag. It's a 3 millimeter width and a 3 millimeter length. Now all I'm going to do, and I know this is going to be a little bit awkward here, but I have to hold that fabric up at the beginning just enough for it to coil. Let the fabric, don't fold it over, let the fabric do the coiling. And as you can see from the back, you can see that lovely zigzag stitch, and you can see the pretty effect that it gives. Now, when this is finished, one trick I do want to show you is that you want to make sure that you figure out which way the fabric rolls the best, so that you can see which side is going to give you the better look. Now I practiced with this, and I noticed that it rolled better from the back to the front, and you notice I've got that neat little tiny lettuce edge on that zigzag.
That's interesting to see which way it rolls the best, because you could roll it either way.
You could roll it either way, but see which one gives you the better look.
Well, Marlis, how exciting. Thank you so very much for your wonderful nightshirt and for your wonderful tips and tricks. And now we have some hand embroidery for you. I'm so happy to have as my guest today Kathy Neal. Kathy is one of the world's leading authorities on hand embroidery. She teaches at our school in Huntsville, and she's a designer for So Beautiful magazine, and has had the privilege of teaching all over the country and studying all over the world. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you so much. It's always good to be with you. Today, I would like to share with you a wonderful stitch to add pizzazz to your embroidery, and that is the satin stitch dot. And this can be used effectively for adding lots of little detail to floral designs or just geometric designs. I have a couple of antique pieces I'd like to share with you. First of all, this is a piece that I purchased at the Paris flea market, and it is an old example of this Normandy lace shaping. And you'll see here on the net these wonderful little dots. They're almost like little pearls, Martha, and it's done right on top of the net. Another example is this old pillowcase that belonged to my grandmother, and you'll see here that the dots were used in the geometric shaping and also to embellish around the floral design, all the little places. To work this stitch, there are several steps, and I would like to share that with you now. First of all, back to our template from the architect supply store. I just love this. And this is a good way to mark our satin stitch dots because they're all sizes, and you can see it gets from tiny to very large. The first step is, of course, tracing the dot the size you want it. The next step is to outline stitch around your traced circle. And then you begin your padding step. Now you have to do a little bit of planning on this. And the planning is that you want to plan your padding, whether you're going to do one layer of padding or 2 layers of padding. What you need to do is to decide the direction in which the stitching will be done on the final satin stitching, and you want to make sure that the layer just under that satin stitching is done in the perpendicular direction to that final stitching. So I'm going to have an up and down satin stitching down here, so I'm going to have 2 layers of padding. The first layer is what I've done right in here. Inside the perimeter of my outline stitching, I've done vertical padding stitches, and the next step is to do horizontal padding stitches, and I've done about half here so that you can see. Now when I get all the outlining and padding done, then I want to satin stitch. And the idea with satin stitch is airplanes. Airplanes taking off and landing. And what we want to do is start at the center point. We don't start on one side. That'll make our dot look square. But we start at the middle of the widest part of the dot, and we do our satin stitching. And when I say airplanes taking off and landing, I mean that I want the needle to angle in like an airplane landing. And then I want it to come out of the fabric like an airplane that is taking off. And I want to keep these stitches just as close as I possibly can get them. And that is our satin stitching. And I use my thumbnail to place those little satin stitches, just like that. Plane taking off, plane landing, plane taking off. Now you can also do this in a 2-step where you actually put the needle in right there under the edge of your outline, pull it to the back, and pull it through.
Which one of those do you like the best, Kathy?
I usually do mine in the 1-step unless it's a bigger dot. Now for a final showing of this dot, this is our satin stitch dot right here, and you can see that after this is pressed and after all the satin stitching is done, it has a very satiny surface. And one thing I'd like to caution our viewers about is that we don't iron on top of our dot. That what we do is we wet our embroidery, we put it face down on a terry towel and iron the back. That makes it plump up.
Oh, Kathy, thank you so much for sharing that technique about those beautiful satin dots. And now I have a really beautiful quilt square to share with you. I'm going to share with you a crazy patch square that is so much fun and so easy to make. This quilt square is one of my very favorites. We have all kinds of really pretty antique laces and the embroidery stitches. And you know, you don't have to have really fancy embroidery stitches to do these because some of these are just little narrow ones. Beautiful antique laces, and if you are so fortunate as to have a machine which embroiders, you can put one of your embroidery designs. This kind of crazy patch is so easy, so I really like to share things that are easy. You probably know that about me. First of all, on this square, and you could use it for a pillow, you simply trace off a lot of nice shapes, whatever looks good to you, and different size shapes for crazy patch. Then you have all kinds of fun on your sewing machine, just stitching stitches. You can stitch down laces. We have, this one just has plain stitching and then bigger stitching, and this one has laces, so whatever you like to do, just stitch them down. Now I will take one of these fun pieces I've just made, and you can see I've already cut 2 or 3 of them here. I'm going to take one of these pieces, and with my magic marking pen I will just look right through this, and I will come in here and I will trace the lines to make another piece, and then I will cut it out. And then I will put all of those pieces on one piece of fabric, matching the lines. Now, I just used raw edges, and then I take them and I zigzag the raw edges together. Now, you know I'm not going to leave raw edges. So the next step is going to be to take a beautiful silk ribbon, and I'm simply, of course, I've got to have a stabilizer. And you know what I like to do? I like to put the stabilizer, let me pull this one back up here. I like, when I put the stabilizer down, I like to use this, just this spray adhesive to kind of put them together. It really kind of holds it and doesn't let it slip so much. That's a great idea. Now I'm going to take silk ribbon, cut pieces that will go over the different seams here, and I took just a little bit of glue stick and glue sticked it down. And now then I choose all kinds of decorative stitches. On this one, for the first side, I have chosen to use a little, let me get this lined up here. I've chosen to use a little tiny feather stitch. And I'm just using a regular needle. I didn't put a wing needle in. I did use the glue stick to glue stick down this little piece of silk ribbon embroidery. And I'm simply using a regular needle and a tiny, 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 tiny baby feather stitch. That is one of my favorite stitches to do. It gives a real pretty, and I'm doing this in white thread so you can really see it. But on my real quilt, when I've used this wonderful moss green, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get my shish kebab stick here, because anytime I'm working on the tiny little piece of ribbon, it looks like I didn't glue it quite so well there. So I'm going to hold my shish kebab stick so I can hold it down. Is it good? No problem. That's what this shish kebab stick is for. And as I go along, I will just hang on to it, and I have this itsy bitsy baby feather stitch, which makes it so very pretty, and then I'll go down the other side. And now won't you come along to my attic with me? I have a really beautiful blouse to share with you today. Several very unusual things about this blouse, and one of the reasons I wanted to share it today was because Kathy Neal's teaching you the gorgeous satin, little satin circles. Now, this blouse is a very unusual piece, and the main reason it's unusual is because it does have the colored embroidery. These are the beautiful satin stitched, all by hand of course, the beautiful satin stitched dots. It has a wonderful scalloped edge on the edge of the dots, all of it done in a beautiful pink. Now, the pin stitch is one of my very favorites. Can we get close enough where you can see that beautiful pin stitch? It looks like the Swiss batiste has been, the number of years it's been washed, of course the pin stitch has been pulled just a little bit. But isn't that wonderful? And also completely handmade buttonholes all the way down the front. Now there are a couple of other places on this blouse where we have those beautiful dots. Here on the pocket, and it isn't really a pocket, it's just been stitched where it looks like a pocket. I think that's one of the most beautiful design elements I've seen in a long time. Then I'm going to hold the little sleeve up for you so you can see that the little dots have also been stitched on the sleeve. And let me kind of get that up a little bit where you can really see it. I love the way it goes up into a little point. Of course, your beautiful buttonhole stitch that makes your scallops on the edge. Absolutely incredible sewing. And on the back, I always love to see how they closed garments. On the back are little loops and those tiny little pearl buttons. That wasn't too easy to close, was it, when you put on that pretty little blouse? What a magnificent blouse, using the same techniques that Kathy shared with you a little earlier in the show. I've just loved having you in my sewing room with me today. Won't you come back and visit me next time?